Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, kushalmehra. Today's podcast is on the Ukrainian drone strikes and the Russian response and everything that has happened around it. So, first of all, Abhijit, I want to ask you now when Operation Sindoor ke pehle, we had this discussion about what constitutes an intel failure. You remember?
Mm,
We had this
yes.
discussion. So now this, from what I have gathered from publicly available information, this was planned 2 years ago by the Ukrainians. So do you think Ukraine by itself had the wherewithal to plan an intelligence operation like this, or this has only happened with the help of some Western nation? That is question number one. And do you think this is a massive intel failure at the end of the Russians?
Um, Again, so there are three levels of Intel: Intel failure, Intel deficit, Intel lacuna. Uh, it begs the question what the Russian intel gathering capabilities in Ukraine are. Because you can't be planning such a massive operation across so many airfields of Russia. Remember, the trucks from which these drones came were placed. Let me bring up a map actually. Uh, uh, One of the air bases hit was in Irkutsk. Now, let me show you where Irkutsk is. Um, and share. Um, okay, you see Irkutsk here?
Yeah.
Okay, let me show you where this is. It's literally over Mongolia.
Hmm.
It's further east than the easternmost part of India, right? Here.
Hmm.
So
Got.
this wasn't long range missiles. This was very short range drones, literally quadcopter drones that you fly at weddings and events and things like that, hidden on top of trucks. Now imagine for so many trucks to get in without border detection in a country that you're at war with. Now, if it wasn't smuggled across the border, it begs the question that when most of the rest of the world has imposed sanctions on you, you aren't even checking equipment coming in from there. They penetrate. The drivers don't even know what their task is. They are hired to just park their trucks at this time somewhere near some airbase, presumably to collect new cargo or whatever. Uh, Now, leave aside the massive gaps out here. Uh, I personally feel this was an Intel failure, but it may very well be an Intel lacuna, which shows you how good Ukrainian counterintelligence has become. They're able to weed out all the planning and infiltration that the Russians would have done of the Ukrainians. Now, that kind of counterintelligence you can't really do without being either completely ruthless and purging people, or B, more likely, which is what American counterintelligence and scanning of all your sensitive posts and things. Number one. Number two, this should not have come as a surprise because we've seen some extremely innovative use of drones in the last several few conflicts. Iran versus Israel. One of these guys was assassinated by a remote machine gun. One of the scientists, the Iranian scientists who uh, was assassinated. They had reconnoitered his path, how he would drive home every evening, and they placed a remote machine gun out there with which they killed him. Right. So this use of remote weapons and things like that, remote satellite guidance and stuff to use drones, the Armenia Azerbaijan war, and now this. But even before this, the Ukrainians have done some very interesting uses of drones. So this attaching an RPG, rocket propelled grenade warhead, to a quadcopter drone and just dropping it on top of tanks was something the Ukrainians came up with. And now, of course, the if you look at Israeli tanks operating in Gaza, They've all got this sort of wire mesh. The kind of wire mesh we put out to keep mosquitoes in India. They've got that wire mesh put on top of their tanks so that the drone won't be able to drop it onto the tank itself. So the Ukrainians have done a lot of innovation. But let us be clear, controlling these drones so precisely over such a long range required satellite data, which Ukraine does not have, satellite linkage, which Ukraine does not have, and this had to be done with a Western satellite.
Okay, so basically, what the West has done here is maybe best case scenario given them details about movement, but all the operational execution on ground, this cannot happen without on ground intelligence operatives, right? And intelligence gathering. How can you pull off something like this, what Ukraine has pulled off?
Intel, yes, but not location data. What the Ukrainians would have done is they would have seen this off some intel shared earlier. The only live assistance that was given, as we know of now, was use of satellite communications to control those drones, right? Because remember what the Ukrainian statement said. They said that all the operatives involved in the operation had left Russia and gotten back to Ukraine. So the way my reading so far from what the Ukrainians have said is they would have got some gullible truck drivers to say, go park your truck here, a consignment will come, it will be loaded onto your truck. Okay. In the meantime, they would have secretly modified those trucks and things like that. So the gullible truck driver would have gone and parked his truck out there, or it could have even been the intelligence operatives that had gone and parked their trucks there 10, 12 hours earlier and left the country on an Emirates flight, or at least with the Irkutsk attack. Irkutsk has direct air links with China. They would have left on a China flight and then left from there again. Right. Now, the controlling of the drones was done from Ukraine. Not a big deal because these drones, like you've seen at weddings and things like that, have their own cameras. There would have been a slight gap, lag, and that's because of the time the satellite communications would have taken, slight, few seconds at best. The question is, whose satellite were they communicating with? Because that kind of communication is a very high beam, high band purchase satellite bandwidth. There's definitely been some collusion because there is no way the owner of that satellite did not know what kind of bandwidths were being used and for what.
Another question that comes to mind when something like this gets pulled off is that, okay, I get the satellite help that the Western countries must have given them, but how many Russians must have helped them? How? How can it happen without local support?
Look, there are so many people. Uh, People tend to forget what a melting pot the USSR was. There are lots of Ukrainians in Russia. There are a lot of Russians with Russian names who would have Ukrainian mothers. There are lots of Russians who oppose Putin who would have had a great deal of affinity for Ukraine, seeing it as a victim of Russian aggression and things like that. In many ways, when Putin himself says, oh, Ukrainians are our brothers and this and that, it's the same kind of mindset. We don't know who helped. Was there help? Almost certainly. But look, for example, the Kommersant chief foreign policy correspondent, a dear friend of mine, is Elena Chernenko. Now, all the co-ending names are Ukrainian names. She, of course, is a complete Russian patriot. She supports the Russian action against Ukraine. And therefore, she can never go to Ukraine because they'll probably arrest her. So, this is the thing of partitioned nations. The loyalty becomes very, very fluid, especially when you were a melting pot before. Right? So, not
So,
surprising at all.
in terms of escalation ladder, where does this lie now? because obviously they have been escalating both the sides, right? And Russia has now really responded hard, which nobody wants to talk about. Russia has responded.
They've responded, but again, it's furious impotence. Really, what have they changed? Except in the northern, in the Sumy salient, which is a continuation of a normal ground offensive. Listen, I don't think people realize that 33% of the Soviet bomber fleet, which is meant to carry out nuclear strikes, has been taken out. That is a violation of Article 19 of their nuclear doctrine, which states that if any country takes conventional action against our nuclear fleet, we have a right to respond nuclearly to you. They have not responded that way. We have seen nothing commensurate in terms of response other than what the Russians have previously done, which has yielded exactly zero results on the battlefield. Okay, so no, Russia has not responded, in fact.
So why do you think they've not?
They can't. What do they have to respond? Short of a nuclear strike, what do they have to respond? The Russian Air Force isn't functioning. Not one of their planes can break the Ukrainian air defense barrier. They were losing hundreds of aircraft till they developed their own version of the JDAM, which is a long range standoff GPS guided bomb. And imagine they develop it now. America has had JDAM since the 1990s. Russia decided to develop it only after 2022, after 25 years of the Americans already having it and using it. They there are This thing has exposed, Ukraine generally has exposed very, very serious flaws in Russian operational doctrine, equipment, training, all kinds of things. This is the first modern warfare that we're seeing without the use of air power. And given the number of troops that are dying, that is particularly surprising. In Vietnam and Korea, it didn't matter how many planes the Americans lost, they would keep throwing planes at it because their thing was ground troops should not operate and our losses would be higher had air cover not been provided for ground troops. You're literally having a medieval, this is like World War One, bro. If Russia, given its size and the number of troops it has, can take out enough Ukrainian aircraft or Ukrainian air defenses, you have a chance of finishing this. I think the problem has been one of Russia committing adequate forces to the battlefield. One of the diktats that Napoleon had put down was, when you attack the enemy, attack in overwhelming force. Find the weakest point, attack in overwhelming force, have numerical superiority over them at that particular point. You don't have to numerically outnumber the entire army, but at that point, you need to be massively numerically superior. You're not willing to do that. There is a lot about Russia's way of thinking that we simply don't get. Maybe it is some genius, 10-dimensional chess move that we don't understand. Uh, okay.
So basically, what you're saying is that Russia, in terms of having the highest number of nukes, is the only thing that is now saving them. Other than that, they're militarily, from a
No,
strategic
nukes are not
perspective.
saving them because they're not using nukes. They're not using nukes. There's nothing saving Russia right now. Understand it. Ukraine is not inside Russia. Russia is inside Ukraine.
Hmm. Like, why does the Russia end this if they've clearly been exposed? I mean, it makes no sense. Why? What do they get? Think from this perspective, they are getting shamed as a military power. That was their only flex, right? As far as Russia is concerned, their only flex was that. Then why? Like, kya milega? It's just Putin's ego at this point of time.
Pretty much. But see, if it was Putin's ego, you have to wonder why he didn't throw in more troops, more aircraft, and things like that. Uh, we don't get it. Are they playing the attrition game? Because see, if you take Ukraine versus Russia today, there is some sense to the attrition game. The average Russian serving soldier's age in Ukraine has not gone up. At the beginning of the war, the average Ukrainian fighting the Russians was around 27, 28. Today, the average Ukrainian fighting the Russians is 38 plus. So the number of Ukrainians who have died means that the average serving age has gone up by 10 years. Maybe in another 2 years, the average Ukrainian serving will be 58 years old. You don't know. So there's clearly a lot of slaughter happening. But is that a good strategy? How does that show your military? I mean, sales. This is something Indians should be thinking about. What of the MiG-29s and Sukhoi 30s you have? If the Russians see, the standard thing used to be India used to win all its wars with Soviet weapons. USSR never really fought a war where it got tested. Afghanistan wasn't really. I mean, that was more of an insurgency, which is a different dynamic. But this is the first proper war that Russia has fought. I'm not getting into Chechnya. Chechnya is a different thing. We can talk about that separately. A proper state-on-state war. And look how Russia is acquitting itself. Look how Russian weapons are acquitting themselves. Look how Russian leadership, generalship, presidentship are acquitting themselves. It's not looking good. So Ukraine may ultimately lose the war. I think, unfortunately, Ukraine will lose the war. But Russia certainly doesn't come out of this looking very good, and Russian weapons don't come out of this looking very good.
So, how did India manage Russian weaponry so well? Or is it because we use a mishmash of indigenous weaponry, Russian weaponry, French weaponry, and it's a combination of that? That was the reason. I have to ask this question because if you make a point like Russian weaponry is exposed, then the natural follow-up has to be, then how does India manage it?
So the first thing we need to remember is that Ukraine's getting a lot of help from the West. And even those older model F-16s and whatever are extremely potent. Pakistan used to get a lot of Western equipment. Let's not forget that. And things went a walkover. The main thing was that Indian training always used to be better than Pakistani training. That mix and match, mostly of French and Soviet weaponry, used to help because it always used to make it. We used to get quantity from the Soviets. We used to get quality from the French or the Brits, as the case may have been. So if you remember in the 71 war and things like that, it was the Canberra and Hawker Hunter and things. The Battle of Longueval was fought by, I think it was the Hawker Hunter, that was carrying out the strikes on all those Pakistani tanks, wiped out the entire armored column pretty much. So that was, you had a mix of both quantity and quality. Russia may high, low, quantity, quality, there is no matrix. They're still stuck. Russian innovation is stuck in 1980s manufacturing. They've never moved beyond the 1980s industrially. China has, but Russia has not. And there's a good reason for it. In 1990, the advice the IMF gave to both China and Russia was concentrate on services, don't concentrate on manufacturing. Russia took that advice. China gave the IMF the middle finger. See where China is today, see where Russia is today. That entire generation of follow-on innovation and manufacturing that could have happened in Russia was discarded. All the scientists and things left for Europe and America and wherever. And that lost generation of the 1990s and early 2000s means that, capacity once lost in such great numbers, you can't leapfrog. China didn't do that. China still steals technology. They understand the how but not the why, which leads to a different set of problems with Chinese technology. But look, I mean, you know, a very good gauge these days, it wasn't a good gauge till the 1980s, because military technology used to be very divergent from civil technology. But a very good gauge of technological advancement is your mobile phone. Okay. Does If your country produces good mobile phones today, because a lot of the technology that goes into this, communications, data sharing, actual data processing and things, are what modern combat requires, means you have a fairly decent military industrial complex. Design and produce. I'm not just saying produce. India produces the iPhone 16, but we don't design our own phone. We don't have any marquees of our own. In terms of vehicles, uh, if you have globally successful brands like China has MG and they produce some truly remarkable vehicles today. I will never touch a Chinese vehicle. That's a different matter. But they do. They produce, like MG selling like hotcakes in India right now, right? So you have these things which indicate industrial power. Would you buy a Russian car? Have you ever even heard of a Russian mobile phone? No.
No. All I know is Russian tanks.
Well, Russian tanks, but again, like I said, these are old, obsolete equipment.
Yeah.
People tend to forget that till the current craze of mobile phones, France had Alcatel, which used to do fairly well in the European
Yeah.
market,
Yeah.
right?
I remember this company, Alcatel.
Yeah. Alcatel, I used to have an Alcatel phone because it was a really funky phone. It was actually much better than the Ericsson in terms of range and reception and things. And because it still insisted on having that little protruding antenna, it even had better clarity than Nokia.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. France produces lots of commercial communication equipment, which is a very good substitute, commercially viable communication equipment, which is a fairly good substitute for mobile phones and things. French cars sell in India, Renault, Citroën. They don't sell well, but they sell. They're globally competitive products, right? Germany, need I say any more? Like Mercedes, BMW. I mean, they're junk,
Yeah.
but that's a different. They're different kinds of junk. They're junk for the Indian market because they are unreliable in the Indian market.
Yeah,
But
but
all of
you
these
can't say they're
companies,
bad cars.
they're not bad cars. They're very good cars
Yeah, very good
in the
cars.
right situation.
Yeah. Like if you're driving in North America, they're very good cars. It's like that.
If you get stuck in the rain or snow in Canada, Kushal, I wouldn't wish a BMW on you ever.
No, I mean
Or
I like Japanese vehicles. I've always
I
stuck
prefer
keen.
Japanese just because they're reliable. They give you peace of
Yeah,
mind. But
that's my
look, here's the thing. Japan produces great consumer electronics. Korea produces great consumer electronics. France and Germany produce great consumer electronic based products like cars and things like that, planes, Airbus. You won't buy a Russian commercial aircraft or a Chinese commercial aircraft, but you will buy Airbus, which is essentially Franco-German, Spanish, Italian, right? UK as well. Uh, they have that industry. And yet, against all the available evidence, people will insist that Soviet weaponry, well, Russian weaponry is fantastic. It clearly is not. In terms of bulk, sure, but are you willing to die in bulk? Tell me, do you think the Indian public will ever tolerate the kind of losses Ukraine and Russia have suffered over the last 3 years?
don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So then what? I have to ask this question because it's in the news. Then what? F-35 या वो जो Su-57 क्या?
Why Su 57 is junk? Let's be clear about it. Let me show you some of the Just bring up my
You
tweet.
tweeted some, तेरे ट्विटर पे जो
Just
तूने किया ना.
bring up the reply tweet. I want to show you this
हाँ रुक, मैं कर रहा हूँ, मैं अभी कर
with the
रहा हूँ.
photos.
हाँ हाँ, मैं वही ला रहा हूँ. हाँ हाँ, आई एम पुटिंग द फोटोज अप. There you go. This one, right? This is the
Correct.
tweet. Yes.
Right. Now, see, one of the biggest emitters of the way a radar works is a beam is sent. It then, if there is something there, it reflects back. That is how a radar detects. Now, one of the biggest reflectors is the fan of the engine. Okay. So, if you show the second photo now, can you see how much of the engine is exposed? It's literally, it's like a neon sign up in the air.
Come hit me.
Come hit me. Okay, now I want to show you what a serpentine S duct looks like in both in practice and in
मेरे को डीएम कर दे. I can keep putting it up.
theory. Okay.
मेरे को ट्विटर पे डीएम कर दे.
No, I'm gonna copy image and can I send it on the chat here?
नहीं, यहाँ पे मत भेज, मेरे को डीएम में भेज.
Oh, Twitter DM. Okay, one
हाँ,
second.
इजी पड़ेगा.
One second. Messages. Okay. Oh damn. Okay. I can't. Listen, I'm gonna have to share this myself. All right.
No
So
problem.
let me share screen. And okay. Now this is what a serpentine duct looks like. Okay. So what you see here is this side is the intake, what you see at the front of the aircraft. If you notice, it is curved like this because it completely blocks where the engine would come here perfectly round, and it is completely blocked off. So you don't have those rotating fan blades which reflect. So technically, if you look at it, this side is perfectly aligned with this side, except for this part going here, which completely blocks off visibility. So if you actually draw a straight line from here, from the bottom of the blue ring here to the bottom of that, you will see there is actually zero line of sight. Right? Now look how it functions in real life. One second, let me just find the, yeah, there we go. Share. Okay, can you see this? This is the air intake of the YF-23, which was a competitor to the F-22. You can't see anything in there. Right. Now, it has also had a whole history of extremely shoddy construction. Let me show you this if I can find it. I'd done a whole thread on it long back. Hang on. There were close-ups which were then removed for whatever reason. Anyway, basically you're looking at 80s construction technique, which means the modern stealth stuff simply can't be built by the Russians. The kind of finishes required, which only surprisingly comes from consumer electronics. Because, consumers won't accept a certain level if you've got funny screws. Tell me, can you ever see if I remove this phone from its case? Mhm. Okay. You won't be able to see a single screw anywhere on this phone. It's done through internal adhesives and things like that. That is something you only get with consumer electronics. And it's a very important thing for stealth, especially. The construction technique of this matches that of a stealth aircraft, of any modern phone. Right? Why? Because screws, you'll always have that little cross in between to unscrew the screw. That is also a radar reflector. The more the screws, the more the radar reflection.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Every unevenness of surface is a radar reflector. Right? So the Russians don't have that. The Chinese are better at it because the Chinese, now look, Chinese have their own weaknesses. Chinese engines, I will any day choose a Russian engine over a Chinese engine. Because for what it's worth, even if it's stuck in 80s technology, the Russians' 80s engines are way better than the Chinese engines. But in terms of finish and materials, the Chinese are not. The Russians are still stuck in metallurgy. One of the frame of the Sukhoi 57 is made of a metal called, it's a alloy called Invar. Invar is one of those rare metal alloys which actually shrink with heat. They don't expand with heat. Right? So that's very useful for the exhaust where there's very high temperatures and things like that. But the West has moved on to composites and crystals, which neither expand nor contract. You understand? So they're still throwing old 80s science at 2020's problems. This is the problem with the Sukhoi. Now, let me tell you the problems with the F 35. First is that it is so networked. I am talking to you from my laptop. Okay. Now, now your laptop, all of you watching this on a laptop or a mobile phone right now, think of your laptop or mobile phone as the F-35. You're very proud of it. It is high technology. It can do all kinds of funky stuff and things like that. Now imagine you had the same laptop or mobile phone in 1995. You won't able to do diddly shit with it. Other than being able to charge it, my laptop doesn't even have a LAN cable anymore. Most laptops don't come with the LAN cable. In those days, there was no internet. You couldn't do Google, you couldn't do video, you couldn't do squat. Your phone would at best be a glorified camera because there is no, forget 5G, there wasn't even 1G in those days. So it's a very advanced platform, but in order to get it and make it functional, you would have to set up 5G network, you would have to set up fiber optic cables, you'd have to set up, you'd have to create the internet in your country. The kind of data networking required for it is insane. And then you will be bound to buy only American or American approved products because non-American approved, non-NATO approved products cannot interface with it. Imagine you set up a 5G network for your iPhone and Apple suddenly says we will not allow you to receive signals on your iPhone because this is a Chinese network or Chinese 5G network that you've set up. That's how these things work. Okay,
So
so
you'll
you
have
can be
compatibility issues.
you huge compatibility issues. This is the same. It is compounding what happened at Balakot, where we shot down our own helicopter, and certain things which you know about and I know about that happened in this particular in Operation Sindoor, which we're not going to talk about in public. But this issue will just get worse. It'll just get worse. There's nothing you can do about it. And the kind of controls America has, basically everything you are able to see and intelligence you're able to gather, the Americans will know about it. Do you trust the Americans that much? Best of luck to you. We may not have an option. If the technological edge becomes so big, we may not have an option, but
That's
uh,
exactly what I was going to tell you, because the technological edge that they offer, the risk reward ratio, because I remember this is exactly what Angad and I were talking about here.
mm,
And that's exactly what Angad said. Bolta hai ki, Angad kind of was like, listen, like the superiority of the product might kind of beat the other problems that people are looking at.
basically, that's probably what it's going to come down to.
And also from a geopolitical
But
perspective, right?
it needn't have been this way. It needn't have been this way. When everybody had you cracked down on all the laxity and kamchori happening with Tejas, you would have been well on your way to the AMCA today. You did not crack the whip. You did not sack people where there was clear proof of blatant criminal dereliction of duty. Then this is what you end up getting: emergency purchases which don't suit you, which possibly even harm you. भुगतो कहते हैं ना, कल करे सो आज करे सो अब, पल में परले होएगी बहुरी करेगा कब. This is exactly what you're talking about. About in 2014, DRDO had signed a deal with Saab. They were on the verge of signing a deal with Saab, saying essentially we'll turn the Tejas into the Gripen. Externally it'll be very different, because there were certain things we wanted. We didn't want the kind of off-road capability, off base capability the Gripen had. We wanted greater range, so there were certain things we would do, and essentially it would be a thing, and this entire plane would be ready in a year and a half. New DRDO chief comes and he cancels the deal. Consequences zero. And that is when Saab had enough and they decide to pull out of India. There were a lot of things you could have done, smart things. And remember, Sweden's defense budget, Kushal, they've got the best selling infantry combat vehicle in Europe, the CV90. They've got an extremely successful aircraft in the Gripen fighter aircraft. They've got an extremely successful AWACS aircraft in the Saab Eri. Okay, they make sensational submarines which have been exported. They make possibly the stealthiest corvette. Let me show you this, because people may not believe this. Let me show you this one by one. This B class corvette. Images. Okay. And I want to show you each one. Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Look how stealthy this is. You look at the front thing, all radar beams are going to bounce off this. This is their corvette. Okay. This is their AWACS, and their AWACS is so good. Let me show you a close-up of this. Their AWACS is so good, it does air-to-air See, this is the air-to-air component. It does naval detection as well. And apparently, it's got a ground-moving target indicator, which means it can do land as well. Now, what happens in all of this is, do you know what the Swedish defense budget is?
Like in terms of percentage or what?
No, just overall.
I have no clue.
For most of the last 20 years, it's been something like about $8 billion.
That's it.
Yeah.
They clearly have specialization in some things then, and they're focusing there.
So what they do is, this is, let me show you the chart. Yeah, this is Swedish defense spending. This is, of course, as a percentage of GDP. Can you see this?
Mhm.
60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s down again. And since the invasion, of course, it's gone up. Okay, but this is how, on low budgets, they've produced their own fighter aircraft, their own AWACS aircraft, an infantry combat vehicle on the ground, two superlative naval products, stealthy submarines and stealthy corvettes. Do you know what India's defense budget is? 70 to 80 billion dollars. At 10 times that amount, you're not able to innovate like that.
And it's around 2.22 to 2 कितना है 2% है ना हमारा बजट का.
Yeah. Huh. But even in absolute numbers, we're not able to do what the Swedes are able to do. You know why? Because they don't insist on doing everything themselves. They harvest technology. So technically, even now, instead of going in for AMCA and things, all you need to do is, are you happy with the final LCA design? If not, go in, just buy the Gripen design. Ask them to redesign it as a stealth for you. There are 2-3 things you need for that kind of stealth. You've already got the ASA radar, which is pretty damn good. You basically need a 360-degree heat sensor to bypass radar. I mean, not entirely, but look, the Gripen has the kind of networking capabilities that the F-35 does. It's a non-stealth F-35 in that sense. Okay. The Swedish data link is up for sale because Sweden is discarded its own data link, not because it was bad. It was a very good product. And they've moved towards Link 16 because they've joined NATO. If you don't want the Gripen, okay. Are you happy with your Tejas right now? Then just develop a stealth around it, single engine. Because we need quantity right now. We neither have quantity nor do we have quality.
It kind of makes Operation Sindoor even more impressive.
It does. I mean, given the dysfunctionality, it was truly mind-boggling.
Kudos to
Okay.
our forces.
But you're dealing with Pakistan. Now imagine this with relation to China.
True. Pakistan is less than 70 IQ. China clearly isn't.
So it's not a good situation, huh? And I don't think we're taking this seriously enough. Angad and I have given up. There's no point hectoring people who are not going to listen. I will still tell you the Tejas program can be salvaged.
If the Prime Minister's office looks at it. Other than
If the
that,
PMO
nobody.
looks at it, it can be salvaged.
How many things will the PMO
But,
personally
but,
oversee in this country is my
but
question.
you have to get rid of all the additional junk like the AMCA, TBDEF and whatnot. You're running bloody three एक प्लेन ठीक से प्रोड्यूस नहीं कर पाए हो और 3 और स्टेल्थ फाइटर का पैसा लेके रखा है तुम लोगों ने.
बट अच्छा, मेरे को तेरे को ये भी पूछना था अभी. फॉरगेट व्हाट दैट अमेरिकन जनरल सेड अबाउट इनवाइटिंग आसिम मुनीर एंड ऑल दैट. दैट इज फाइन. आई मीन आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड व्हाई इंडियंस आर सो सेंसिटिव. इट्स लाइक, अरे यार, उनको जो करना है वो करेंगे, हमको जो करना है हम करेंगे, एंड वी आर स्ट्रांग इनफ नाउ. द अमेरिकंस आल्सो नो वी आर नॉट गोना बच. सो इवेंचुअली, और ट्रम्प इज द वर्ल्ड क्लास एक्सपर्ट इन थूक चाटना. सो ट्रम्प 500 बार थूक चाट लेता है, उसको कोई शर्म भी नहीं आती. ट्रम्प से बड़ा बेशरम कोई धरती पे पैदा नहीं होएगा, मेरे को लगता है. So I don't know why this, but I want to talk about what the hell is happening in Iran, because I was driving all day. So what is happening there now? Because is this the reason why the Americans were so obsessed with India Pakistan to stop fighting?
I suspect, look, with Trump, it could be, it may not be also. They must have promised him something. Those crypto bros might have promised him something and he might have fallen for it. Or it could be Iran. Given what is happening today, US forces have been put on high alert in Bahrain, and all non-essential personnel have been withdrawn from Iraq. I suspect there's some kind of a strike that's going to happen, or maybe it's just rattling Iran to say we're getting ready to hit you. But I think it has a lot to do with Iran.
So, but what, the Israelis are going in? What the hell is happening?
I don't think it'll just be an Israeli strike. I think it'll be a joint Israeli-American strike.
ये बट अमेरिका को सडनली फिर से क्या प्रॉब्लम हो गया ईरान से?
Maybe the nuclear negotiations aren't going anywhere. Because, the last nuclear agreement, the JCPOA, it didn't stop Iran from doing a lot of things. And at the end of it, 15, 20 years, I forget the exact thing, Iran could have proceeded then with a nuclear weapon. And in defense of Obama, I have to say no agreement is permanent. Okay. America also signed lots of ballistic missile defense agreements with Russia that it backed out of, it walked out of. So people walk out of agreements. Nothing is ever an absolute guarantee. Trump wants this agreement in perpetuity, which I think is essentially a non-workable agreement. They don't want Iran doing any reprocessing. They don't want Iran exploring the full possibilities of the nuclear fuel cycle. They want all the used radioactive material to be taken out of Iran. And for it to be just come in, do power production. The moment power production has happened, it gets sealed in a safe canister and gets removed from Iran. No reprocessing, no nothing. And Iran says, boss, read the NPT. We're an NPT country and we have all these rights. You can't just take away our rights because you feel this way. Now, the question is again a cost benefit. Is Iran willing to take a strike on its nuclear facilities? And they just might. Now, if there is a fallout from it, they're going to require bases in Pakistan, the Americans.
हमने तो उनके अमेरिकन्स के सारे बेस मार दिए.
It wasn't American bases. Who told you it was American bases?
अरे तो अमेरिका ही यूज करेगा ना उनको तो इवेंचुअली.
No, but those are repaired in a week, so that's not a big deal.
उधर उस दिन वो क्या, वो मैंने फोटो देखी, ताड़पत्री लगा के पाकिस्तानी सब तारपुल है.
Don't go into these minor shits, huh? Like, this is irrelevant in the overall scheme of things. We've really not, I mean, in the American scheme of things, we haven't done much. It takes a week, 2 weeks for the thing cement to cure and it's fixed. Within the American timeline, it's perfectly fine.
So, how I wish India should just do some ungli right now. It would be so entertaining.
Well, I suspect Pakistan is going to do something. Now, I want to point this out. This is a template now. Last time 9/11 happened, okay, Pakistan was up shit creek. The Americans had to threaten them to give them bases to act in Afghanistan. And the Pakistanis wanted to test that security guarantee, which is why they carried out the attack on India's parliament. And America prevented India from attacking Pakistan, saying, please, let us finish what we have to do in Afghanistan. Till then, don't do anything to Pakistan. After that, you do whatever you want. The problem was the American entanglement in Afghanistan became endless.
20 years.
And after about a year or so, we said, fine, let's withdraw Operation Parakram and we get back. Today, you might see the same thing happening. Pahalgam has happened. The Americans need to bomb Iran. They might get entangled with Pakistan again. And Pakistan, in order to, Pakistan is like that sadistic lover who wants to walk her lover through all kinds of hoops. So they will carry out another attack on India to test America's security guarantees after America stations out there. It is almost an inevitability now for some major attack to happen in India, not in Kashmir. I suspect it will be in the heartland. One of our financial capitals, Gurgaon, Bombay, Hyderabad, Bangalore.
The interesting bit is that India clearly is not in a mood to pull the lever out either, because
Yeah,
look
we're
at,
not.
yeah, the Indus Water Treaty and all of that. We've still gone ahead. We are
Yeah,
still screwing them.
yeah.
So I don't know. See, Americans basically have nowhere to go. They eventually have to accept that this time, if Pakistan does something, and Pakistani, see, all the fluff and bluster
We don't
aside,
know that, well. We don't know that. They may still end up stopping us some way or another.
how?
They have 100 things. Listen, America is a global power. They have 100 things to threaten us with. We may just have to settle for token strikes here and there.
I don't agree. I mean, after the kind of things we have done, see, we have also followed a escalation ladder pattern, right?
Hmm.
So next time we will have to escalate even more than what we did this
Ladder
time.
bilaterally. The escalation, trilateral escalation ladders are very different.
I don't
A,
agree.
a bilateral escalation ladder doesn't naturally translate into a trilateral escalation ladder.
Well, then the Americans better hope the Pakistanis don't do anything, because
Listen, I am actually salivating at this prospect because I know the Pakistanis will screw them up the butt. I wish the Americans on the Pakistanis, and I wish the Pakistanis are on the Americans.
yeah, well,
Because look, America needs its refresher course in Pakistan studies. The fact remains, we all know Pakistan is going to screw America over. So I'm just looking at this as, if America stops us from doing what we want, at least the Pakistanis are there to fulfill our fantasies of fucking over the Americans.
yeah, well, Pakistanis, you have to give it to them. Pakistanis know how to play the Americans short term very well.
Extremely well.
Very well.
Or they're blessed with a neighborhood that provides these opportunities. You must be blessed to have a neighbor like Afghanistan and Iran that are constantly boiling pots where the Americans have an interest.
Yeah, I don't know what. See, the whole thing about. But see, what I find very interesting is Trump's whole shtick was, oh, I don't like war. So I think Trump just wants a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that. Is one thing Obama has on him. So I guess Trump is the jal kokda.
Which I think Trump is consigned to the fact he's never going to get. But anyway.
So I don't understand what Trump is looking at this, because if he goes in Iran, that then how does he spin that I don't like wars? I mean,
He
his
may not
base.
he may not go into Iran. It may just be something like they did in Iraq, which till the 2003 invasion, which was what? Have air bases in all the neighboring countries and sit and enforce a no-fly zone, a no military action zone, uh, constantly keep bombing them every single day for the next 10, 15 years. initial bombing campaign and then a peace, quote unquote, peacekeeping campaign where they're not allowed to have their aircraft aren't allowed to take off, etc., etc. There's lots. Listen, there's a militaries are a Swiss Army knife. There's a lot you can do with them. It isn't an all or nothing calculus.
Fair enough. चलो मैं कुछ questions देखता हूँ and then we can wrap it up. Okay, ये एक तो मैं पूछ चुका हूँ. Oh, what are the pros and cons of giving US an airbase in India? Never.
Huh?
Should India give a US Americans an airbase in India?
No.
Do you think Trump and the Americans will try to justify inviting Asim Munir to the US?
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, so
Let them.
like, yeah, I mean, I don't understand. Again, why are Indians so obsessed with this? Like, I have never understood this with Indians. You are the OG transactional nation on planet Earth, and you're like, तुम दूसरा वाला क्यों transactional है भाई? अरे हर आदमी होता है भाई. तुम तुम्हारा करो, वो तुम्हारा अपना करेगा. Please, I mean, seriously. We have already covered F-35 and Su-57. So what he care? Mm, mm, how much privatization of defense spending is ideal?
Privatization of defense spending or defense R&D?
Hmm.
All R&D should be private. The government should only have a DARPA like agency where, it is scientists who perform brilliantly in the private sector are brought in for 3 to 4 year paid vacations, essentially, where they're allowed to go bonkers and indulge their wildest scientific fantasies. Uh, but privatization of defense, no. Defense production and manufacturing, yes.
Hmm.
You can't have private armies like Wagner. Wagner का क्या हुआ था पता है ना? They marched on Moscow.
Yeah. Do you think we should join GCAP?
Why? Why should we join GCAP?
Hmm. अभी ये किसी ने तेरे को याद दिलाया. Do not forget about doing a.
I don't know why these questions keep coming. Pros and cons of an American base. Boss, what pro are you going to get from that American base? Tell me this.
Nothing.
Because
You
the
should.
Americans, unless you sign an alliance with America, that base is useless against China also. Na? And if you sign an alliance with America against China, then you're target number one,
Hmm.
as Ukraine is finding out. Okay, GCAP again. So just everything I said about the F-35. So GCAP is the future combat aircraft, European combat aircraft, sixth generation combat aircraft that the Europeans are developing. Everything that I've said about F-35 will apply to the GCAP. Are you willing to get rid of your Sukhois? Are you willing to get rid of all your Russian fleet of submarines? Are you willing to get rid of all your Russian equipment?
Hmm.
If not, then what are you talking about? Most of those technologies, they will not give it to you unless you're more. See, defense sales trust is based on political trust. For the Europeans, political trust is only an alliance. Unfortunately, they look at it in binaries, whether you look at it in binaries or not.
Hmm. Okay, if these idiots buy the Su-57, should we just scrap the LCA, MK2, and AMCA projects? They are PPTs anyway because of CATSA.
I have given up on any kind of intelligent decision making on this. We may end up buying both the Su-57 and the F-35. हम ऐसे level के चमनचूती हैं हम. No, we've done it before. We've
I'm,
literally done it before.
I'm just laughing because it's just the way
No,
you said it.
the Jaguar and the MiG-27 used to do exactly the same thing. But we bought both the Jaguar and the MiG-27. When the Pakistanis, the last time we did an emergency purchase like this was when the Pakistanis bought the F-16 in 1981 or 82, I forget when.
Mm-hmm.
It was already 79, 1980, I think. And our panic response was to buy both the MiG-29 from Russia and the Mirage 2000 from France.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Pakistanis now get the I don't know, J-36 or whatever they're getting right now, we will end up buying both the F-35 and the Su-57. I won't put it past. We have got a history of doing this.
Yeah, well, they're kind of stupid. Okay. अरे किसी ने बिजनेस ऑफर दे दिया. I can pull in capital to set up manufacturing for defense. Can you help expedite what to manufacture tech partnership capex I can bring in? मैं क्या दलाल हूँ क्या डिफेंस का.
I
मेरे
won't switch defense manufacturing on anybody in this country right now.
को तुम लगे
The
रहो.
way in which the Babus give people, I have seen verifiably amazing technologies that the Babus give such runarounds to. It is just insane. It is insane.
अभी क्वाड का क्या होगा?
अपने क्वाड को गांड में घुसाओ. There's a reason quad and गांड rhyme.
So was it ever a thing? On a very serious note, was it ever a thing?
Look, I knew it wasn't a thing the moment the Australian Chief of Naval Staff rocked up at Raisina and started talking about the blue economy. Okay, Raisina did this huge panel, got so much attention, where all four naval admirals, the US Chief of Naval Staff, the Indian Chief of Naval Staff, the Australian Chief of Naval Staff, and the Japanese Chief of Naval Staff were there. And the Australian Chief of Naval Staff is only talking about the blue economy. Like, गई भैंस पानी में. Okay, very good.
Last question.
And the very fact that they came up with AUKUS after that, Australia, UK, Australia, it's run its course.
I think a lot of these things are done for acronyms because acronym generator भी use करने होते हैं ना कभी कभी. सबका time pass हो जाता है. More shit gets done in a G20, G7 than any of these cord short bricks.
Yeah, absolutely.
People think G7 and G20 are useless and these things are important. Complete opposite.
An air battle, certainly not ground battle due to terrain. Yes and no. Air will mostly be to support ground. China has some pieces of territory it really wants, so it will only be air battle in aid of ground grabbing. Next.
Okay. नहीं और तो कुछ है नहीं, मैं देख रहा हूँ. ठीक है चल, लेट्स रैप इट अप. ठीक है चल, बाय बाय. मेरे को भी अभी सोना है. इधर रात के 1:30 बज गए. अभी मैं जा रहा हूँ. चलो.
रात के अंधेरे में कौन मारता है? बुज़दिल मारता है.
ओके चलो अभी मुझे सुबह उठना है. अच्छा हाँ, बट बिफोर I wrap up, ladies and gentles, to all the Canadians who are actually watching this. So once again, I would like to remind all of you This is the National Security Conference that we are hosting on the 29th of June this month, Sunday. It is going to be at the Paramount event space at Woodbridge, Ontario. If you have not registered, you see the QR code in the link right now. Go register immediately. If you have not, I'm also leaving the live registration link for all of you in this, and it is also going to be in the description of the podcast. So जहां जहां जैसे जैसे जो करना है तुमको वो कर लेना. Go register. It's one of those conferences which is actually open to public. Otherwise conferences are boring places where only 15-20 people come. So once again जाओ register करो, अभिजीत को फॉलो करो, मुझे फॉलो करना है मुझे करो, और चलो अभी मैं सो रहा हूँ, बहुत लेट हो गया. आई विल सी यू गाइस नेक्स्ट टाइम. टाटा बाय बाय.
Bye bye.